Hi, my name is Bob. I'm an alcoholic. This is the report of findings of the District 6 Ad Hoc Committee for Hybrid Meetings. I was privileged to be a part of this committee. It has been a while since these findings were reported to the body, but we're going to record it and post it just in case anybody else is interested in what the process was or if they're going through the process themselves. So the contents here, this report is in the order that it was presented to the body. I'm going to do it a little bit differently here after going through this first part of the process. Really, what we did started with having some guiding principles and then taking some actions, going through the work that led to developing best practices and the recommendation and background. So continuing on with the process. So the brief history, before April of 2020, in-person attendance was the only option at District 6 business meetings. Due to closings related to the pandemic in late March, virtual attendance became the only option starting in April 2020. We got back into our room. We've been renting a room at one of the local colleges. That was in October of 2021. Had virtual attendance right from the start. Getting back in remained an option. Our meeting place did have the technology for virtual or hybrid classrooms all set up. And at the beginning, little was done to facilitate the hybrid meetings. During the next year, challenges and limitations were identified, and this committee was formed in September of 2022 to recommend best practices. Now, in order, I'm going to go to this sidebar here first. The motion was passed in September of 2022, but it was first brought up in August at the meeting. A group of District 6 members, including most of the ad hoc committee, met in August of 2022 and discussed whether or not to continue hybrid, which is not the stated purpose of this committee. So that meeting was basically a back and forth. The argument that really had to go to the body. Everything was said and repeated, so there was no point in going forward with that. We've agreed a motion would have to be made to the body if somebody wanted to end the hybrid meetings. That was done, so that was discussed by everybody, but the actual motion that we wrote that the body passed, that an ad hoc committee be formed with the purpose of recommending best practices for hybrid business meetings, including but not limited to elections, voting on motions, expectations for attendance, and how to best integrate in-person and virtual attendees to promote unity and fellowship. This ad hoc hybrid meetings committee will meet monthly for up to 1 year. So that was the motion. Obviously, it is directed toward best practices, not toward deciding whether or not to continue. However, that discussion did result in having a pretty good hybrid pros and cons list. So at least something came out of it. We knew what everybody was thinking as far as why to keep it and why to get rid of it. Then we developed lists of needed hybrid meeting improvements from both in-person and virtual perspectives. These lists were followed by lists of possible solutions. Let me just drop down here to the bottom or on the right. Anything that has an A is shown in the appendix. Anything that has a B here at the end of the sentence is shown in best practices. And R is for the recommendations. So B is for best practices, R is recommendations and background. Okay, so after a list of possible solutions, we moved into hybrid election procedures. As was noted, that was September of an even year when this motion passed. In November of that year of even years, we have panel elections. So that happened a little bit out of order, but out of necessity. So then we eventually added some equipment, a little bit of budget left over at the end of the year, added a tripod and an active USB extension in order to free the camera up from the podium. Our meeting place's built-in technology is a major blessing, but it does limit us to keeping our technology aspirations simple. We'll explain that a little more later. Then outline the duties of a hybrid meeting facilitator and meeting hosts, scripted host actions. Following our literature committee's example, they were already doing online workshops and presentations, and then made further incremental improvements via trial and error. And then, of course, the last thing we did was determine recommendations and their backgrounds and brought them to the body. Now, instead of recommendations right now, I'm going to drop down to what we did in order. So start with some guiding principles. These are the 12 statements of technology from the 2014 National AA Technology Workshop. I'm not going to read them all here. If you want to read them, please go ahead and pause this recording. They are just very good guidelines for any technology project. And then, of course, from the forward to the fourth edition, this statement about, basically taking advantage of technological advances as technology grows to be able to reach out in different ways to alcoholics in need and in service. So now some of the action items, and this gets into some of the detail that is left out in earlier, or the best practices or the recommendations. So it's actually a little bit better to go through them in this order anyway. So from that first meeting, the discussion about whether to continue, we got these pros and cons, and the goals determine how we can accentuate or make the most use of the positives and resolve or alleviate the negatives. So the pros, including the virtual option, is all inclusive, which includes health compromised members, mobility challenged, remote communities, work conflicts, vacation, travel, visitors from outside District 6, and GSRs who otherwise wouldn't attend. The other pro, our current meeting place was already set up. It was fairly easy for us to do. And our virtual meeting platform by that time also used for committee meetings and literature workshops. There was really no support for getting rid of the virtual platform, so that was already available. The cons were a lack of camaraderie, fellowship, unity. There's a challenge communicating between the room and virtual attendees. Lack of inclusion. There's no GSR, or at least at the time, there was no GSR orientation for people on the virtual platform. And there was the question of, are people who attend virtually showing less responsibility? Talking about GSRs who might otherwise attend in person, staying home, District 6 members going to less effort to attend in person. No basket is passed on the virtual platform. At the time, we did not have an electronic system. It adds time to the meeting. I'm not sure that's ever been really accurate. Only the last couple of years, we've had a deadline. Since we've had a deadline, we've never had a problem ending the meeting on time. So I think the time of the meeting is about different things, really, but that was one of the concerns that was raised, and that the hybrid screen is distracting. So at this point, we had an official committee, and we had the pros and cons list. Because of the way the motion was written, most of the people who didn't want to have hybrid dropped out, but we did have a couple of voices of reason trying to make sure that the in-person attendees were represented fully. So the goals of our, we'll call this shortcomings, that can be shortcomings for virtual attendees that need improving or in-person attendees that need improving. So the goals: make improvements wherever possible and recognize limitations where patience and tolerance are the best course of action. So improving things for virtual attendees included they can't hear the person speaking if they're not near the microphone. can't hear when multiple people are talking, and the room sometimes gets a lot of chatter in it. Can't talk among ourselves without it going over the speakers in the room, and that is a challenge we can't really overcome unless we send people to breakout rooms. And not everyone knows how to use the meeting platform, which is just always an ongoing thing with new GSRs and new trusted servants coming in. For in-person attendees, no communication between the room and virtual attendees. Obviously, you can listen to reports and people can all raise their hands to comment or ask questions, but there's no real dialogue going on. Some cases, they just don't know virtual attendees. Obviously, you're going to get to know people more if they're in the room and you can have a conversation with them, especially if you're never on the virtual platform with them. Ending the meeting on time. We definitely had to look into the idea of how is this extending things. Really, the only way it's extending things is making people walk up to the microphone. And then having to do just a little extra. You do have to do a little extra, as I mentioned, going to the podium to speak, repeating questions from the floor if they're not heard by virtual attendees, being interrupted by virtual attendees. So we have to try and work on all these things. Now, here's some of the action items. We decided, meeting facilitators were going to have to be used to help out with a lot of these things. So the goals for our host duties, virtual meeting hosts. This was an initial list quantifying meeting service requirements for hybrid meetings. At the time the list was made, meeting facilitator was used to describe what we now refer to as hosts. Okay, so in the room before the meeting, suggest to the chairperson that speakers come to the front of the room and questions be repeated as needed. Using the tripod with a swivel, point the camera at the person who is speaking. Watch for raised hands on the virtual platform because the chairperson and whoever is giving a report, for example, usually has their back to the screen. And repeat questions that are not picked up by the microphone or remind the chairperson as needed. A virtual member preferred will turn on and follow closed captioning to confirm if questions are picked up by the microphone. Notify the chairperson when the speaker is not heard. And then stuff that can be done on the virtual platform or in the room, such as renaming participants to our naming convention. Restrict participant chat and manage chat. Assist the registrar as needed. New GSR orientation. And remind all that love and tolerance is our code, to treat everyone with respect, whether we agree or disagree with them. That's an always and everything kind of thing, but it seemed to come up more when, discussing differences between the in-person and virtual attendees. Now, some technology needs. The goals to make it easier for virtual attendees to hear people who are not at the front of the room, give in-person attendees more flexibility regarding where they stand when giving reports, or asking questions, or participating in discussion. So our meeting place, the classrooms, are equipped with a computer, projector, and screen, and ceiling speakers, which makes it all really good. Couple of limitations, though. What's great is we only need to provide a webcam to conduct a hybrid meeting. Now, there is only one USB input. As such, if we want to use multiple microphones, that would require some complex hardware, such as a mixer. And we have pretty big rooms, so that's one of the reasons why the microphone doesn't always pick everybody up. Regular USB extensions did not work. The computer wouldn't pick up the camera. So we did get an active, what's known as an active or repeater. It's really a powered USB extension cord, which worked well. And part of the problem is that the USB input was at the top of the podium, so there was already one extension cord going to the computer. That is it for our appendix items. I'm going to jump up to best practices now. Okay, the best practices we developed for hybrid overall. First off, bestow the same rights and responsibilities for in-person and virtual attendees wherever possible. And in a way, that's a bridge from a guiding principle to a best practice. For example, virtual attendees are not automatically muted, and like in-person attendees, they have the responsibility to speak only when appropriate. Next, make participation similar whenever possible. For example, when in-person attendees vote by raising their hands and being counted, so do virtual attendees, rather than using a poll. And recognize when differential treatment by method of attendance is more practical. For example, virtual attendees automatically have name tags on our platform. In-person attendees are not expected to wear name tags, and even if they did, it wouldn't help virtual attendees identify them. So, we say our names when we speak. So the overall goals for best practices: keep it simple in terms of financial commitments and tasks for trusted servants, pass it on by documenting what, when, and how, and why we arrived at these recommendations, and provide the best overall meeting experience for both in-person and virtual attendees. Now, best practices for a hybrid meeting coordinator, someone who is overall responsible for getting everything set up and the tasks that we assign during the meeting. So first off, schedule trusted servants in advance to make sure the following meeting tasks are covered: the webcam setup and operation, hosting the chat, which is just posting information specific to virtual attendees because it's not useful to people in the rooms. Then hosting screen shares. This would be information for all attendees, things that go up on the screen, like if we have a motion and then we want to amend it, it's a lot easier to have it on a screen share than to try and have somebody writing it down and rereading it over and over again. And then watching the screen for raised hands among virtual attendees and notifying the chairperson. Next, create and update manuals, checklists, and other training materials for hosts and attendees, including how to set up the audio-video system in person, how to chat and screen share, and directions for attending virtually on our virtual platform. We want people to know how to mute and unmute themselves, raise and lower their virtual hands, and how to view the closed captioning and pay attention to the chat. We also needed to take care of having a virtual GSR orientation, which we have. And then having a small pool of trusted servants trained for each task. The overall goals: have a pool of trusted servants prepared to help, and make sure everyone involved is prepared before the meeting. More best practices for the hybrid meeting coordinator. It would be to have a report. The report could include who's going to be hosting next month's meeting or asking for volunteers as needed, and asking committees and officers to please provide their screen share requests as far in advance as possible, and notifying the body of any updates. Script the timing and content of chat posts and screen shares. So in other words, you want to have a script that says what is going to be put in the chat or put on the screen share and when it will be appropriate to do that, so that whoever has the responsibility has instructions. So under that, meet with the host to review the scripts before the meeting, and details about the scripts do appear on the next slide. So the goals for these best practices are the same as the previous. It's for the hybrid meeting coordinator. Have a pool of trusted servants who are prepared to do what they need to do. Now the scripts. I'll go to the goals first. Provide information to members, facilitate motions, support reports, etc. Simplify the task of hosting by providing the timing of chats and screen shares, as well as the content to copy-paste for chats, or specific images, files, and web addresses for screen shares. Now the chat script will be specific to virtual attendees and will include our naming convention and helping with renaming. Then the web address for GSR orientation is in there, web address and password for the meeting agenda, and web address for help using our virtual platform. These all go into the chat script. Screen share script will include items seen by all members, including motions, area motions or GSC consider items when they're coming up and we're discussing them, reports such as this one as needed, flyers or other items to complement verbal reports upon request by anybody making a verbal report. And at the end of the meeting, we screen share the Declaration of Unity and Responsibility Statement, and just in case anybody hasn't memorized them yet. And then the screen share script does change from meeting to meeting. The chat script is mostly static. There are some things, Area 15 or GSO links that might be put in there depending on what we're going through that particular month. Now, best practices for additional meeting tasks with the goals of timely setup, room safety, helping virtual attendees see and hear the room, and helping virtual attendees participate when the chairperson has their back to the participant screen. So first, with webcam setup, whoever's going to do that needs to attend the previous meeting in person and take the equipment. Otherwise, we have to schedule a transfer between whoever did it in 1 month to whoever did it is doing it the next month. Then arrive early enough to set up before most other members arrive, even if the room is locked when you arrive, meaning sometimes the classrooms are locked. So you have to arrive early enough to count on the possibility that you might have to wait 10 minutes for campus security to show up and unlock the room. And then set up the camera near the front of the room, but back from the podium so that people can stand in front of the podium or at the podium and still be seen on camera. And wherever cables or cords are on the floor, use a table to block members walking over them. Then with camera operation, adjust the tripod height as high as it's comfortable to operate from a sitting position. Then turn the camera toward the person who is speaking, adjust it up or down to show their face. Turning it toward them usually helps also with the audio, depending on the webcam. Additional tasks for the operator or another volunteer, watch the participant screen and raise the yellow hand on a stick to indicate a raised hand among virtual attendees. Somebody somewhere found a fly swatter shaped as a hand, which is great. So now we need to have that instead of something that's makeshift. And then watch the closed captioning and indicate when the microphone does not adequately pick up the speaker. And then there's the election procedures, which were approved by panel 73 for their elections. That was before we brought this all to the body, though. This includes non-voting virtual attendees are moved into a breakout room during ballots, and non-voting in-person attendees are seated apart from voting members in the room. This is because our elections are anonymous, so we use ballots instead of raising hands. The list of candidates is screen shared from a computer spreadsheet rather than written on the blackboard. This improves visibility, legibility, and record keeping. Number of votes is also on the same screen share with a computer spreadsheet adding up in-person and virtual votes and calculating percentages. This provides full transparency that the number of votes does not exceed the count of virtual, in-person, or total voting members. It also calculates and shows percentages, which minimizes disputes about what represents substantial unanimity. People seem to calculate 2/3 differently. Somebody has to get out a calculator to prove it to people. No more. And the third legacy procedure is actually shown below each ballot. So below the names and the votes, if it's the first ballot, then the procedure for the first ballot is shown right there. Scrolling down the sheet below the second ballot, if needed, shows the procedure for a second ballot. So there's also conditional formatting in the spreadsheet. So any candidate that achieves 2/3 or more majority is automatically highlighted. And finally, each sheet can be saved for a complete record of the election and given to the Archives Committee. And that's the end of best practices. I'm going to move up to the recommendations and their backgrounds. So here are the recommendations. One, place responsibility for hybrid meetings within the website committee and consider renaming it to the technology committee. Two, in addition to positions described in our general committee guidelines, create the position of hybrid meetings coordinator within the technology committee. Three, also consider creating the position of webmaster with the responsibility of making updates and additions to the website. Four, propose adoption of business meeting procedures which focus on accessibility for all. Five, adopt panel election procedures which were in place for panel 73 elections. And the background for the first, I think there's 2 pages of background for placing responsibility for hybrid meetings within the website committee. Consider renaming it the technology committee. So the website committee has maintained and facilitated our teleconferencing since we started using it in 2020. Along with the ad hoc hybrid committee, the website committee operated largely in a silo during the trial and error phase of learning how to make hybrid meetings work, so nobody else really had the experience. As such, this committee is best prepared to produce initial training manuals. Now, the literature committee also worked on its own to develop structure for its workshops and information sessions. The literature committee and website committees were working together more closely since the beginning of 2023. Of course, all District 6 committees and members were welcome to become more involved, still welcome to become more involved. So due to the shortage of members interested in technology positions, there may not be enough interest to staff both a website committee and a hybrid committee. There may come a time when there are enough members interested in technology and dividing the committee up might be reconsidered. And then finally, renaming the committee would reflect additional responsibilities of maintaining a teleconferencing system for hybrid and virtual meetings, managing a video channel for digital media, and other interactive components on the district's website. And I can say there was such a motion, and it did pass, and it is now a technology committee. Another recommendation, create the position of hybrid meetings coordinator within the technology committee. This also passed. Background, there are specific recurring requirements for hybrid meetings. Someone must bring a webcam and set up the room, or virtual attendance is not possible. The meeting experience is enhanced by having someone do each of the following: operate the camera to always show the person who is speaking, watch the screen for raised hands among virtual attendees, watch the closed captioning to assure the microphone is picking up the speaker, monitor disruptive behavior and remove any meeting bombers when needed. We really haven't had that problem, and it was brought up in the committee, so it was in the report. Mute virtual attendees as needed. We've had that problem with virtual attendees and in-person attendees who have to be told to pipe down. Manage chat to give information to virtual attendees, and screen share to facilitate the meeting. Also, under background for creating the hybrid meetings coordinator, in our experience, the meeting tasks listed on the previous slide are too much for one person to handle. Position of hybrid meetings coordinator would be responsible for maintaining the equipment and purchasing replacements as needed, recruiting, training, and scheduling virtual hosts and in-person facilitators for meetings, creating and updating training materials for hybrid meeting setup and hosts, and giving a verbal report to the body and providing a written report to the recording secretary. This position is not funded to attend a night at the Area 15 Assembly. The background here, if Area 15 creates a standing hybrid meeting committee or even creates a hybrid meeting, the District 6 hybrid meeting coordinator should be defrayed, because then it would benefit the district and/or area, whereas at this point it does not. Now also consider creating the position of webmaster, the responsibility of making updates and additions to the website. Having a webmaster is typical of technology committees. The webmaster would be responsible for updating the district6aa.org forwarding emails, as well as making updates and improvements to the website. Meanwhile, the committee chairperson would set meeting agendas, give reports, and oversee the committee, as well as helping with the website and anything else. And then there is certainly value in the webmaster attending Area 15 website committee meetings. As such, this position should be defrayed for one night stay at the area assembly. Okay, the motion on this, which did pass, actually refers to it as web servant, a little 12th tradition humility anonymity there. And the position is funded for one night stay at Area 15 assemblies. Okay, another recommendation, propose adoption of business meeting procedures which focus on accessibility for all. Some of these procedures are going to cover areas that are normally the chairperson or alternate chairperson's responsibilities, such as asking in-person reports to be given from the front of the room, asking other speakers to come up to the front of the room, or the person who is up front, meaning the motion maker or report giver, to repeat the question as needed if it can't be heard by virtual attendees. There are other procedures which cover everyone else's responsibilities, such as how virtual meeting hosts communicate with the chairperson or alternate in the least disruptive manner. Don't want to be interrupting all the time to say people can't hear, etc. And then limiting interruptions from other members to point of order and point of information. We don't want everybody on the virtual platform to be unmuting themselves and saying, I can't hear all the time. Okay, so these procedures would be guided by our code of love and tolerance with the goal of maximizing everyone's meeting experience. As such, there was no motion. We just try to conduct our meetings these ways and remind our chairperson as necessary, please show this kind of respect to the people who are attending virtually. And finally, adopting the panel election procedures, which were in place for the panel 73 elections. Again, there was no motion. We never really had a motion written down as to how it was done in the room, which already included separating voting and non-voting members. So we knew who was allowed to put a ballot in the hat. So since we're trying to do things the same way, it's just a matter of this is the general way we do it. As these procedures were already approved for panel 73, it was kind of a formality to include them in this report. The basic principle to make in-person and virtual voting procedures as similar as possible. For example, regular meetings where motions are voted on, or even usually elections of unfilled positions by raising hands in person. They're also raised hands on the virtual platform. We can see who's voting and verify that they're a voting member. These are not anonymous. Now, one thing that's not written in here that we try to do is tell virtual attendees, if you're going to vote, you have to turn on your camera, because we do want to see who's voting. For third legacy procedures, we do use anonymous ballots. As such, we need safeguards to ensure that only voting members are casting votes and non-voting members and guests are separated both in person and virtually. Virtually, they're just put into a waiting room or a breakout room until the poll is over, then they're brought back. And see appendix, we already went through the appendix on that. And this is the recommended technology committee org chart, which would be great if these positions are ever all filled. But the chairperson who is funded, the alternate chairperson who would be funded if the chairperson can't make it to Area 15, the webmaster or web servant who is funded for a night stay at Area 15 assemblies, the hybrid meetings coordinator, not funded, and then for monthly volunteers, in-room, camera setup operator, etc. And then we need a screen share host and chat host. And that is the entire presentation. If you have any questions, you can contact technology@district6aa.org. Thank you.
All audio and video files on the district6aa.org website or the District 6 in Area 15 YouTube channel are for personal use only. Reproduction, distribution, and commercial use are not permitted. In accordance with District 6 current practice, no faces are shown in our videos and audio is scrubbed for anonymity prior to publishing. Contributors whose voices are heard have given record and release consent.